They say dead men tell no tales. But what if one man's silence was so loud, it echoed across 5 decades, through courtrooms, crime families, and the corridors of American power? Jimmy Hoffa didn't just disappear, he was erased. And the story you're about to hear is not just about a vanishing act, it's about betrayal, corruption, and the kind of silence only blood can buy. This is not just a cold case. This is a Cold War fought in shadows between the Mafia, the FBI, and a man who knew too much. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you'll not only understand why Jimmy Hoffa had to vanish, you'll start to wonder if the people who made him disappear are still controlling the silence today. July 30th, 1975. The Red Fox Restaurant, Detroit. Jimmy Hoffa, once the most powerful labor leader in America, pulls into the parking lot in his green Pontiac Grandville. It's 2:45 p.m. He's there for a meeting. 2 men were supposed to join him, one a feared mob boss, the other a trusted friend. By 2:55 p.m., Hoffa is pacing outside. By 3:30, he calls his wife, irritated, and tells her they're late. By 5 p.m., Jimmy Hoffa vanishes. Completely. No witnesses, no struggle, just gone. His car, still there. His body never found. How does the most high-profile man in the labor world simply cease to exist? Unless he was never meant to leave that parking lot alive. To understand why Hoffa disappeared, you need to understand who he was and what he had become. Born in 1913, raised in poverty, Hoffa was a fighter. He didn't climb the ladder, he built it. By the time he was 40, he was running the Teamsters, the largest labor union in the United States. The Teamsters controlled the trucks, and trucks controlled America. You couldn't move goods across the country without crossing Jimmy Hoffa. But his power wasn't just economic, it was political. Presidents feared him, senators bowed. He was the man behind the man behind the man. But power like that doesn't come clean. Hoffa forged the dark alliance, a marriage of convenience with the Mafia. They helped him win union elections, crush rivals, and control strikes. In return, he gave them access to billions in pension funds. It was a deal with the devil, and when he tried to walk away from it, the devil came to collect. In 1967, Hoffa's empire began to crack. Convicted of bribery and jury tampering, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. But even behind bars, he still pulled the strings. And when President Nixon commuted his sentence in 1971, there was just one condition. He couldn't return to union leadership until 1980. But Hoffa, he wasn't patient, he wasn't careful. He was coming back, and he wanted his throne now. That's when the real danger began. Because to get back in, Hoffa would have to expose the men who had taken his place, men with blood on their hands and guns in their waistbands. Mob bosses like Tony Provenzano, crime families from New York to Chicago. Even Teamster officials who owed their power to Hoffa, but wanted him dead. He was a threat to everyone. And that's when he made the worst decision of his life. He arranged a meeting. The Red Fox Restaurant wasn't just a meeting spot. It was a trap. Hoffa told his wife he was meeting Tony Provenzano and Anthony Giacalone, a Detroit mob figure. But both men later claimed they never scheduled a meeting, never went there, never saw Hoffa that day. No witnesses came forward. But something did happen, because Jimmy Hoffa never came home. His car was found unlocked, no blood, no sign of a struggle. Just the faintest trace of human presence and a parking lot full of silence. The FBI swarmed the scene. Tip lines rang off the hook. The media exploded, but days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. And Jimmy Hoffa's name began to fade, not because people forgot, but because they were too afraid to remember. Let's break down the key suspects. Tony Provenzano, a feared capo in the Genoese crime family, had a known feud with Hoffa, had threatened to break his legs. Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone, a Detroit mobster, who had met with Hoffa several times, allegedly offered protection. possibly offered something else. Chucky O'Brien, Hoffa's foster son and close aide, drove a car similar to one spotted at the Red Fox lot. Denied involvement but was shunned by the Hoffa family for decades. Frank Sheeran, a labor official, hitman, and self-confessed killer, claimed he shot Hoffa in a house in Detroit in a confession later dramatized in The Irishman. But here's where things get even more chilling. Each of these men had motive, each had opportunity, and yet none of them were charged, not one. Because the deeper the FBI dug, the more things disappeared. Witnesses vanished, evidence was lost, leads went cold. It was like chasing ghosts through fog. And Hoffa, still gone. In the early 2000s, a house in northwest Detroit was searched. It belonged to a mob-connected associate. Blood was found in the floorboards, too degraded to test. Hoffa's scent was allegedly traced there by dogs. Another tip sent authorities to a horse farm in Michigan, where it was claimed Hoffa had been buried. Ground-penetrating radar showed irregularities. Nothing was ever found. Then came the New Jersey landfill theory. In 2021, the FBI searched a site under the Pulaski Skyway based on a deathbed confession. Forensic testing followed. Again, nothing. It was as if the world had swallowed him whole. But here's the question. Was Jimmy Hoffa really murdered that day, or did he disappear himself, forced into hiding, living under protection, somewhere no one could reach? Because if there's one thing Hoffa knew, it was how to move men and money without leaving a trace. When a man disappears without a trace, the silence left behind is never empty. It's full of whispers. Whispers of betrayal, of murder, of secrets so tightly sealed they could crumble the very foundation of power in America. Jimmy Hoffa's name is still spoken in hushed tones and backrooms where deals are made behind locked doors, places where loyalty is a weapon and trust is a trap. But here's what you need to know next. The truth about Hoffa's disappearance is not buried in the past. It's alive, pulsing beneath layers of lies, waiting for someone brave enough to peel it back. Years after Hoffa vanished, the world got tantalizingly close to answers. Or so it seemed. Enter Frank the Irishman Sheeran, a man whose story reads like the plot of a thriller, but one rooted in real life. Sheeran was a labor union official, but also a hitman for the mob. In 2004, he shocked the world with a chilling confession. According to Sheeran, on that fateful day in 1975, he drove Hoffa to a house in Detroit, where two mob bosses waited. They talked, tensions rose, then Sheeran said he shot Hoffa in the back of the head. The body burned in a kiln on the property. This confession, detailed in the book I Heard You Paint Houses, and later the film The Irishman, seemed to bring closure. But the truth, it only opened more questions. Many experts, including Hoffa's family and former investigators, have doubted Sheeran's story. Why? Because the FBI had tracked Hoffa's movements carefully that day, and Sheeran's timeline doesn't always match the facts. More importantly, no remains were ever found on the alleged property. No evidence of a burning kill capable of destroying a body. No eyewitnesses. And Sheeran's confession came decades after the fact, from a man known for exaggeration and self-preservation. Still, the story sticks because it's the closest anyone has come to an answer. Jimmy Hoffa was a man surrounded by shadows. The men he trusted most were also the men with the sharpest knives. Tony Provenzano and Anthony Giacolone, two Mafia heavyweights Hoffa was supposed to meet, denied the meeting ever took place. Provenzano had a violent history with Hoffa. At one point, Hoffa allegedly threatened him with a baseball bat. Giacolone was known for controlling rackets in Detroit and had a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Some say Hoffa was lured to the Red Fox restaurant on purpose. Others claim he was set up by those closest to him in the Teamsters. The FBI's role and their blind spots. The FBI had Hoffa under surveillance long before his disappearance. They knew about his ties to organized crime, his plans to regain control of the Teamsters, and the deadly rivalries brewing beneath the surface. But when Hoffa vanished, Their investigation was sluggish and full of missteps. Files were lost, leads ignored, witnesses ignored or intimidated. For years, rumors circulated that the FBI had inside information, maybe even complicity, but feared exposing powerful crime syndicates. The truth: the FBI never cracked the case. Instead, Hoffa's disappearance became one of the most infamous cold cases in American history. Theories that defy logic, and the most chilling one yet. In the decades since Hoffa vanished, theories have flourished. That Hoffa was buried beneath Giants Stadium in New Jersey, that his remains were dumped in the Detroit River, that he was spirited away by the mob to live in exile. But there is one theory so chilling it has haunted investigators and conspiracy buffs alike. What if Hoffa's disappearance was not a murder? What if it was a forced vanishing? The forced vanishing theory. Some insiders whisper about a secret deal between Hoffa and the government. They say Hoffa had dirt on politicians, mobsters, and union leaders that could topple governments. Facing threats from all sides, Hoffa supposedly agreed to disappear to leave his life behind and live under witness protection. The price: silence. But decades later, no credible sightings have ever emerged. The man who was the master of moving millions vanished, yet no trace of him was ever found. The human cost of silence. Behind the headlines and conspiracy theories, the Hoffa disappearance shattered a family. Josephine Hoffa, his wife, never stopped searching. For decades, she clung to hope, begging for answers. Their children grew up haunted by unanswered questions, and the labor movement lost its most fiery, complicated leader. Despite the case growing colder, the hunt continues. Recently, advances in forensic science and digital technology have opened fresh possibilities. In 2021, FBI agents dug at a New Jersey landfill, following a tip from a dying mobster's confession. Although no remains were found, soil and water samples are still being analyzed. Elsewhere, private investigators continue to follow cold leads, using DNA genealogy similar to the breakthroughs in other cold cases. Is the silence about to break? What happens when you get too close? Some who tried to uncover the truth about Hoffa's disappearance have faced threats. Others have simply vanished. The mystery isn't just a puzzle, it's a warning. Because in this story, power doesn't just corrupt, it kills. They say some secrets never die, that some shadows stretch long far beyond the grave. Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance is one of those shadows. It's a story that refuses to rest, haunting America's conscience, daring anyone to pull its dark thread. Decades after he vanished, new FBI files were finally released, exposing chilling details hidden for years. Names long whispered about were confirmed to be tied to Hoffa's final days. One document detailed surveillance photos, conversations recorded by wiretaps, and cryptic references to the sit-down, a phrase mobsters use to describe a hit. But here's the thing: despite the piles of evidence, the key players always manage to stay just out of reach. One man, a former mob enforcer, stepped forward with a bombshell claim he had seen Hoffa alive months after his supposed murder. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation, suggesting Hoffa might have been kept prisoner, bargaining for his freedom, or a deal too dangerous to make public. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear Hoffa's disappearance wasn't just about power or revenge, it was about control. Control over an empire built on sweat and fear, control over the voice of millions of workers, and control over the delicate balance between crime and politics. The disappearance reshaped the American underworld. Crime families learned that no one was untouchable, not even a man who once ruled them all. Hoffa's vanishing sent a message: cross the line and you disappear. But it also left a scar on the labor movement, silencing one of its most fiery champions and casting a pall of suspicion over the union's future. Without Hoffa, the Teamsters became a shadow of their former self, forever haunted by his ghost. Today, private investigators and cold case detectives chase the faintest glimmers of hope. DNA genealogists sift through decades-old evidence, New witnesses whisper secrets on their deathbeds. Each lead, each clue is a step closer to lifting the veil on the greatest unsolved mystery in American history. Yet, for all the progress, one question remains. What really happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Was he murdered and buried in a shallow grave beneath the earth? Was he spirited away, a pawn in a deadly game bigger than any of us can imagine? Or did he walk into a new life under a new name, silenced forever? And here's the most chilling truth of all. The people who made Jimmy Hoffa disappear are still out there, watching, waiting, because in the shadow world Hoffa inhabited, the cost of silence is eternal, and those who break it pay with their lives. So, before you leave, ask yourself, how deep would you go to uncover the truth? How much would you risk to hear the story no one once told? Subscribe now, because the silence is breaking, the shadows are stirring, and the next secret might just be the one that shatters everything you thought you knew. Jimmy Hoffa vanished in 1975, but the story is far from over, and whoever finds the truth might just become the next name whispered in the dark.